Daniel had lived alone in the same flat in Shoreditch for 3 years. He liked it precisely because nothing unexpected ever happened there. The building was old, Victorian red brick, 5 floors, a narrow staircase that creaked on the 3rd step, regardless of how carefully you placed your foot. His flat was on the 2nd floor, number 7, with a single window that looked out over a quiet side street lined with plane trees. In autumn, the leaves turned a deep amber and pressed themselves against the glass in the wind. In winter, the street went grey and still, and he could see all the way to the end of it, where it met the main road and the city resumed. He worked in cybersecurity, not the dramatic kind, not government intelligence or corporate espionage, but the quiet, methodical kind. He reviewed network infrastructure for mid-sized companies, wrote reports, identified vulnerabilities, suggested patches. He spent his days thinking about the ways systems could be compromised, and his evenings not thinking about it at all. He was good at separating the two, until the evening he came home to find his router had changed its own name. He noticed it by accident. He had come home late on a Thursday in November, dropped his bag by the door, made tea, and opened his laptop on the kitchen table. When he connected to the Wi-Fi, a small notification appeared in the corner of his screen, the kind that appears when your device joins a new network for the first time. He had lived here for 3 years. His laptop had connected to this router thousands of times. It should not have shown that notification. He clicked on it. The network name was different. He had named his network when he moved in. A simple, forgettable name. The kind you pick in 30 seconds and never think about again. It had been called that for 3 years. Now, it was called something else. Now, it was called Daniel Come Home. He was already home. He set down his mug. He looked at the router on the shelf by the window. A small black box with 2 antennas, a row of green indicator lights. Completely ordinary. He had owned it since the flight. He had never had a problem with it. He picked up his phone and opened the router's admin panel, something most people never do. The back-end interface where you can see every device connected to the network, every setting, every log. He had set up the admin password himself when he moved in and never changed it. The password no longer worked. He tried it 3 times, locked out of his own router. He spent the next hour on his laptop going through everything he knew. The router model was old enough that there were known vulnerabilities in the firmware, ways of accessing the admin panel without the password if you were on the same network. He found the relevant exploit, ran it carefully, and got in. The admin logs showed that the network name had been changed at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. He had been asleep at 11:47 p.m. The device that made the change was listed only as an internal process, not an external connection, not a device on the network, but something running inside the router's own firmware. He scrolled through the rest of the logs. The router had been doing things at night for weeks. Small things, mostly. tiny packets of data sent to an IP address he didn't recognize, at irregular intervals, always between midnight and 4 a.m. Never during the day, never while he was awake. He copied the IP address and ran it through a lookup tool. It resolved to a server in East London, 12 minutes from his flat. He almost dismissed it. IP addresses were unreliable. They resolved to registered locations that were often wrong, often outdated, often just the nearest exchange rather than the actual source. It probably meant nothing. But the name. Daniel Come Home. That was not a firmware glitch. That was not an automated process. That required someone to know his name. Someone had accessed his router, changed its network name to include his first name, and locked him out. And they had done it from inside the network, from a device that the logs showed no record of. He went through every device connected to his router in the past 30 days. His laptop, his phone, his smart TV, a set of wireless headphones. Nothing unusual, nothing he didn't recognize. He checked the TV. The TV was a mid-range smart television he had bought 2 years ago. It connected to the Wi-Fi to stream services, nothing more. He almost passed over it. Then he noticed something in the TV's connection log that he had not seen before. The TV had been accessing the network between midnight and 4 a.m. every night for the past 6 weeks. He had not been watching television at midnight for the past 6 weeks. He crossed the room and looked at the TV. It was off, completely black. The small standby light glowed red at the bottom of the screen, which was normal. He pressed the power button on the remote. The TV turned on. It was already on a channel he had never watched. A local access channel, the kind that broadcast local council meetings and community notices, the kind nobody watched voluntarily. The channel was showing a static holding image, a plain blue screen with white text. The text read, "Why haven't you come home yet, Daniel?" He turned the TV off. He unplugged it from the wall. He sat on the sofa in the silence of his flat and thought very carefully about what he knew and what he didn't. What he knew. His router had been accessed from inside his own network by a device that left no trace. His television had been active overnight for 6 weeks without his knowledge. Someone or something knew his name. The IP address that had been receiving data from his router was 12 minutes away. What he didn't know? Everything else. He was not a person who frightened easily. His work was built on the assumption that systems could be compromised, that any network, given enough time and the right approach, could be accessed. He had built his professional life around that assumption, and it had never frightened him because it had always been abstract, theoretical. Other people's systems, other people's vulnerabilities. This was his flat, his name, his television. He opened his laptop and began to write down everything. Times, dates, log entries, the exact wording of the messages. He had learned early in his career that the most important thing when something went wrong was to document everything immediately, before memory could soften or rearrange the details. He wrote for 2 hours. Then he looked up the IP address again. He found a satellite map of the location. It was a warehouse building near the canal in Hackney. A converted Victorian warehouse, the kind that had been turned into studio spaces and small offices. The kind that had 40 or 50 separate tenants and no single owner responsible for what happened inside. He looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop and went to bed. He did not sleep. Over the next week, he monitored everything. He factory reset the router and set a new password, a 24-character string he generated randomly and wrote on a piece of paper he kept in his desk. He disconnected the television permanently and moved it to the hallway cupboard. He installed network monitoring software on his laptop that would alert him to any unusual activity. 4 days passed quietly. On the 5th day, the monitoring software sent him an alert at 2:17 a.m. He was awake. He had been sleeping badly all week, and he saw the notification immediately. An unknown device had connected to his network. He opened the monitoring software. The device had no name, no manufacturing ID, no MAC address. All the identifying information that every network device is required to broadcast had been stripped out or spoofed. It was invisible to the network, except for the fact that it was there, connected, drawing a signal. He watched it. For 4 minutes it sat on the network doing nothing. Then it made a single request, a tiny packet of data, sent not to an external server this time, but to his laptop directly. Not a request for data, a file transfer. Something was trying to send him a file. His hand hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then he accepted it. The file was 4 kilobytes, a text document. He opened it in a sandboxed environment, an isolated virtual machine that had no connection to anything else, standard precaution, and read it. It was a list of every network he had ever connected to. His home network, his office, the coffee shop near Liverpool Street he went to on Friday mornings, the network at his parents' house in Bristol, the hotel in Edinburgh where he had stayed for a conference 2 years ago, the hospital Wi-Fi where he had sat for 6 hours last January waiting for news about his father. 47 networks, going back 4 years. The last entry on the list was not a network name. It was a sentence. We have been on every network you have been on. We have been watching from every router you have trusted. We are not in your devices. We are in the space between them. We wanted you to know. You, of all people, should know. He sat in the blue light of the virtual machine for a very long time. You, of all people, should know. Someone knew what he did for a living. Someone had tracked him across 47 networks over 4 years, not by installing anything on his devices, not by compromising his laptop or his phone, but by living in the infrastructure itself, in the routers and switches and access points that he connected through without ever thinking about them, the invisible layer between his devices and the internet that he had always treated as neutral, as passive, as simply the medium through which data moved. It was not neutral. It had been watching. He thought about every sensitive network he had ever connected to, Every client whose infrastructure he had reviewed, every report he had written from a hotel room or a coffee shop, every personal email sent through a router he hadn't owned. He typed one question into the virtual machine's text editor. What do you want? He connected the virtual machine briefly to the network. 4 minutes later, the unknown device connected again and delivered its response. Nothing from you. We wanted one person who understood what we are, to know that we exist. You were the right person. You spend your life telling companies their networks are not safe. You were right. You were always right. It is worse than you thought. That is all. Sleep well, Daniel. The device disconnected. He has never detected it since. He has never found any record of it on any of the 47 networks. He has never been able to explain to anyone, not his colleagues, not the researchers he consulted quietly and anonymously, how something could persist across routers without being in any device, without leaving any trace, without having any physical form that could be found or removed. He still works in cybersecurity. He is better at it now than he was before. But he thinks differently about networks, about the routers in coffee shops and airports and hospital waiting rooms, about the invisible infrastructure that carries every message and every search and every private thing ever transmitted. He thinks about the space between devices. He thinks about what might live there. And every night, before he sleeps, he looks at the small green lights of his router on the shelf by the window, steady and quiet and blinking slowly in the dark. And he wonders if it is watching him back. If this story kept you awake tonight, if it made you look at your router a little differently, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. If you want more, subscribing takes 1 second. There is a new story coming very soon. Good night.